everyone. This is Katie Roper with Caring.com. Welcome to our webinar, Why Most Senior Living Marketing Sucks and How to Improve It. I am thrilled today to be joined by Dan Hudson, the Chief Strategy Officer of Cornerstone Affiliates, and I'll introduce him a little later. He is going to be our guest speaker today on our webinar. Thank you to everyone again for joining. Before we dive into Dan's presentation, though, just a few housekeeping items. As usual, the presentation will be available within a few business days, and we'll mail it out to you in an email if you've registered for the webinar. Also, as usual, this is a one-way webcast. That means that we can talk to you, but you can't actually talk to us. But we do encourage you to ask questions. You can use the question box on the right side of your screen, and that will allow you to type in your question, and we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Now you get the commercial. I apologize, but this is a free webinar, so I reserve the right to take a couple of minutes of your time to talk about Caring.com, the company that I'm proud to work for. We are the largest website specifically targeting senior care. We have thousands of articles, tens of thousands of listings, and over 100,000 consumer reviews, along with online support groups, expert Q&A, and a number of other features. So if you're not already working with Caring.com, I hope you'll consider us at the end of the webinar. So enough about me and enough of the commercial. Let's get into the reason I assume you're all here, and that's to hear from Dan Hudson. As I mentioned, Dan is the Chief Strategy Officer at Cornerstone Affiliates. That is the recent grouping that includes the B Group, ABHOW, Beacon Communities, Seniority Inc. That have a number of incredibly beautiful CCRCs and other senior communities, including the one that I drool over, which is White Sands. It's right on the beach in Southern California. And Dan is a brilliant marketer, brilliant strategist. If you're not already following him in social media, LinkedIn or Twitter, you really ought to, because if you're not connected with him, you're missing out on the really interesting things he has to say. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dan and let him share with you the interesting things that he has to say about why senior housing marketing mostly sucks. So Dan, you should have control.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Wow, that was quite a build-up. I'm feeling a lot of pressure to be brilliant now, and I'm only brilliant, occasionally. And I appreciate your stumbling over how to describe Cornerstone Affiliates. We do it all the time. We spent a lot of time initially after we went live with the affiliation trying to explain, what this actually represents when ABHOW and B Group came together, and for various regulatory and organization of debt reasons, it's not a merger. It is an affiliation. But try explaining that to your residents, your team members. You spend 20, 30 minutes just explaining the difference between an affiliation and a merger. And I know some of you will be going through this yourselves because mergers and affiliations, I think, are going to be one of the hot ticket items in this industry. Both has been on the for-profit side already, will grow in importance on the nonprofit side, and so if you run into that situation and you're looking for someone to commiserate with, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So thank you again, for joining us today. I originally did this presentation at the Senior Living Innovation Forum in Napa back in June, and that grew out of a LinkedIn post that I did last September entitled Random Thoughts on Why Your Marketing Sucks. And that post really grew out of my frustration that so much senior living marketing continues to focus on the wrong things and really tell the wrong stories. That presentation was originally, I think, it was about 15 minutes. I'm going to talk more slowly and hope that we fill in a little more of the time, but I really do hope, I want to preserve a block of time at the end of this presentation. I know a webinar is not the most convenient way to have a conversation, but I would like to encourage you to ask questions, to make comments. I'd like to encourage a dialogue because I really think the state of marketing in our industry is at a turning point. We are really feeling a lot of competitive pressure as an industry. We're seeing increased interest from outside the industry because consumer products companies, internet startups, everyone is finally realizing that, wow, people are getting older, and there's a lot of them. We've called it the silver tsunami. For whatever reason, other companies outside the industry for quite some time weren't really realizing it. They continued to focus on a younger demographic, but now they really do realize that as baby boomers, reach retirement age and beyond, there is a huge market opportunity. And that means increasingly more sophisticated marketers are coming into this space, whether working in senior living communities or working for our competitors or future competitors. And we really, as an industry, we need to up our game. So this presentation is still fairly random. I want to give you some food for thought. That's really my goal with this presentation. This is not education. It is not designed to provide you with the answers, really. I'm hoping that it will inspire you to sort of think beyond what you may have been doing and start to explore some new ways of thinking about how you market your communities. And I will say that any insulting things I say are purely my opinion, not the opinion of Cornerstone affiliates, and certainly not the opinion of Caring.com, because I know Katie and her people love you all and love all your websites and all your marketing materials and think you're all brilliant. And she tells me I'm brilliant all the time, and sometimes I feel a little dumb. So with that, let's see if I actually do have control over this. There we go. Okay. Katie, I apparently do not have control.
Click again. That box was popping up. No?
Okay, hang on. Hang on. There we go. I found the arrow.
Ah, okay.
Ah. You want to do your quick poll?
I'm going to do a quick poll. We have a quick poll. So while we're waiting, let's see. Okay, we're getting some votes. We've got about 18% of people voting. The question is, how do you feel about your current marketing program? 4 options. We've got about almost 60%, 70%. Awesome, thank you. The poll should be live on your screen. And I will share the results with you as soon as we're done. Okay. 80%. Thank you, everybody. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll and share the results. So here's what you all said. How do you feel about your current marketing program? 26% of people love it. 7% hate it. Looks like most people sort of meh. So there you go, Dan. Great setup. And we'll go back to the presentation.
And I think those results don't surprise me. I think that, you know, everybody is making a really, you know, a good faith effort, doing some work that they're proud of, doing some work that, you know, maybe they question, is this really the greatest value, the best return on my investment? And then they're doing some things that they feel like they have to do, that there's pressure from inside the organization, pressure from sales, to continue to pursue some marketing initiatives that, you know, they feel a little conflicted about. So, and I would say the 20% who didn't respond, they're just probably feeling really ambivalent and don't know exactly how to answer that question. And some days I land in that 20%. So let's see, here we go. So let's first start with some context. You know, this first definition comes to us from the American Marketing Association. So we're defining marketing as that, you know, activity, set of institutions. We're talking about creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. I frankly don't care for that definition. I think it's very academic. I think a better definition comes from Philip Kotler. Kotler is a professor at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. He's, you know, one of the world's foremost authorities on marketing. You'll notice that we're not just talking here about communicating and promoting. We're really talking about creating customer value. And I think that's something that we sometimes lose sight of in our marketing efforts. You know, there's such an emphasis on communicating, on promoting, on positioning, that we don't think of marketing as really part of the product. You know, that the marketing itself should be providing customers with real value, that we're not simply trying to sell something. So we're going to start with a question. Why is community living for seniors a niche market? And when I say that it is a niche market, you know, the number of older adults in this country would suggest that there is great potential for what it is we sell, whether it is community living, home care, you know, whatever line of business we're in. There are currently about 46 million people age 65 and above in the U.S. About 14.5% of that population, about 14.5% of our overall population, that's 1 in 7 Americans. We know the stats about how those numbers are going to grow in the coming decades. So of that number, we have about 1.4 million seniors living in nursing homes. We have 885,000 living in assisted living. And then we have another 745,000 in CCRCs. Oh, and by the way, this is not to scale. That's to scale. So now the pessimists among us are depressed and the optimists are excited, right? So there's this great market opportunity out there. We have a lot of room for growth. If you're like me, you're a little bit of both. You're a little pessimistic and a little optimistic. I truly do believe in the benefits of community living for older adults. I mean, when I talk about our company, I talk in terms of, you know, we are unapologetic evangelists for the concept of senior community living because we know firsthand through experience the impact that living in a community can have in terms of providing a platform for a richer, more purposeful, healthier life. We think it is very competitive with the home, and in many cases, for many seniors, it is superior to staying at home. And I'm sure you all believe this as well. And it bothers me. I mean, I take it personally that more older adults don't take advantage of what we offer. And there are several reasons they don't, and I think we're all familiar with those reasons. You know, the single-family home has a strong emotional hold on people, not just seniors, but on their families. Change is incredibly hard for everyone, particularly people who've been living in the same place for 20, 30, 40 years. People hold unfortunate misconceptions about retirement communities. You know, we've done a lot to combat that, but there are still people out there who think of it as the old folks' home. They still think of retirement communities in a more pejorative sense. We know that many can't afford it. You know, we provide both affordable housing for very low-income seniors and CCRCs, which tend to gear toward a more affluent senior. And we all know that there's this vast middle in the market that we as an industry are challenged to serve. And you could probably add several additional reasons to that list. And in fact, I'd like to suggest a few additions to this list for your consideration. So there's not a lot of product variety out there, and that limits appeal. Residential living, assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, you know, CCRCs that roll it all up into one package. You know, within those categories, we claim we're different from our competitors, but we're really hard-pressed to come up with compelling specifics. That's a problem. It isn't to say that we're not fielding some very nice product. There are wonderful communities out there. I could walk you through our communities and tell you, you know, we're doing a really good job. But you've got to wonder if our appeal isn't limited in part by a lack of options and not a lot of differentiation in terms of the resident experience, in terms of the customer experience. You know, I went to a major market online. I won't name the city. We blacked things out to protect the innocent. But I wanted to look at how different communities are really positioning themselves and telling their story out in the marketplace. And what you find, I think, is that our marketing generally reflects this lack of variety and originality in our products. There's very little that I would describe as innovative or risk-taking. You know, I pulled 3 home pages from communities in the same metro market. I hope you don't see anything familiar here. If you do, I apologize in advance. I could have just as easily pulled your competitor's page. But I think these are fairly typical of what you'll find, and it's regardless of market. For example, this one promises life just keeps getting better once you move in. You live among friends in a graciously appointed apartment. There's a full calendar of activities. Every need is provided for. It's conveniently located near everything. It's elegant with a grand entrance, a well-appointed lobby, beautiful common areas. It's like a cruise ship. And you've got a nice picture of, I guess, the front door of the building. Oops. Sorry, we skipped. This is the one I was just talking about. Although, if you go to the next one, it's pretty much the same. This next one, they provide full-service senior living. You see the list of levels of care. They have beautiful landscaping, quiet streets, stately trees. Again, you know, not much of anything to really differentiate. This one's a retirement tradition of lakefront retirement living. So it's a retirement community, in case you missed the point in the headline. It's cozy, it's home-like, they're friendly, it's a full range of services. Now, to be fair, there are a few sites out there in this metro market that do a better job of bringing their communities to life, but unfortunately, I have to say that this is fairly typical of what you will find online. And I do find that this aligns with, other marketing tactics. If you look at the marketing collateral, you're seeing the same kind of messaging, the same, lack of real storytelling and lack of differentiation. Frankly, the marketing we do in senior living, I believe, would not cut it in other consumer product industries. Have you ever wondered what marketing would look like in other industries, say, industry, if senior living professionals were doing it? Well, oh yeah, it looks something like this. Seriously, what do auto companies do really well? You don't even have to look at the advertising. Just think of the taglines they use. BMW is the ultimate driving machine. Lexus used to be all about the relentless pursuit of perfection. Ford trucks are built Ford tough. Each of those immediately conjures up a sense of the brand, and they do a really good job of differentiating themselves from the competition. So what does a great tagline do, and by extension, what does great marketing do? First of all, it's memorable. Second, it includes a key benefit. BMWs are really fun to drive. A Lexus is well built. Ford trucks are tough. You can use them for that heavy-duty work that you need to do. A great tagline, great marketing differentiates the brand. If I say Mercedes or Toyota or Volvo, your mind immediately forms specific associations with those brands. And if you're doing your job right, you're imparting positive feelings about the brand. I mean, who doesn't want to drive the ultimate driving machine? As you look at this, can you really think of anything comparable in our industry? I honestly can't, and I'll include ourselves. I mean, that's something that we struggle with as well. Is, what's that brand experience, and how does it manifest itself in our individual communities? Katie, a little help, please.
Yeah, okay, so what we're going to
go back.
Yeah, we're going to try now is...
no, don't go there. Go back. There we go. Thank you. Now, there we go.
Okay.
You may not have noticed, but this is my first webinar. You can see I've really mastered the controls. So we're not really great in expressing our brand. We're also not very good at telling the story of how our product changes lives. Okay, and we change lives. I mean, we have such amazing story potential in what we do. Isolated seniors flourish when they join our communities. Families find peace of mind. We have stories of widows and widowers who overcome their grief with the help of neighbors and staff in our communities and continue to live rich lives. Our residents discover new things to be passionate about. They continue to live engaged, purposeful lives. They grow, they thrive. And yet we talk about our cozy home-like environments, our well-appointed lobbies, and our stately trees. But where are the stories about how we really impact lives? And I'm not talking about testimonials, traditional testimonials where it's, wow, the staff here is so compassionate, and ooh, the food is so good, and it's like living on a cruise ship. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about stories that really bring to life how we are making a difference in the lives of older adults and their families. Now, Procter & Gamble is brilliant at this kind of storytelling. If you've watched the Olympics, as we all did, you've probably watched the Procter & Gamble advertising on TV that they've now been doing for a few years. And they tell their story not by touting their products, but by saluting their primary customer, and that is our mothers. And now, Katie.
Okay, now, so we're going to try a new thing. Dan is pushing the boundaries here. We're going to try sharing a video. If for some reason you have trouble seeing the video over the webinar, or if you would just prefer to go to YouTube and watch it offline, here's the URL, but sit tight. I am going to attempt now to share a video, and here we go.
There's no picture, Katie.
Oi, filha. Você tá bem. Você tá bem.
Katie,
Yeah,
there's no picture.
I see it, Dan.
Oh, you do? Okay, maybe it's just me.
Desculpa. Deixa eu ver junto com você.
Hej, lasten är i ro. Hostade montad.
E aí, gatinha? Tu tá indo pra onde? Tu tá indo pra onde?
大赛马上要临近了，
我不受得了。儿子，你行的啊，你可以的，孩子。
P&G, proud sponsor of moms.
So hopefully you saw that, and if not, I would encourage you to go to YouTube. I really do think the P&G campaigns are really brilliant in terms of associating their brand. And you notice it's never about selling the product. It's about associating their brand with some really compelling storytelling around, you know, the role that mom plays in your life. And yes, P&G has, you know, huge marketing budget, but telling simple stories about how community living changes the lives of our residents and their families really doesn't have to come with a huge price tag. You know, we do video that touches on a variety of issues. We do other storytelling in other content formats that's focused both on consumer education and on storytelling that we hope starts to explain what the community experience is about. I think one of the challenges for us is, and Margaret Wild at ProMatura touches on this a lot when she speaks, and that is, you know, what really resonates with people? What do they value most in the community experience? It's not the chandeliers in the lobby. It's not the, you know, the programming, the activities. It's really about belonging in a community, living what my normal everyday life is. It's telling that when you survey residents and you ask them, do you feel like this is home? They may really enjoy living in your community, but they don't necessarily equate it as, quote, their home. And our goal really needs to be making it their home. Because you want that level of emotional engagement. Remember how hard it was to move someone from their home to your community. Well, you want to create and deliver an experience that is just as difficult, you know, where they would never even think of wanting to leave their community because for them it is home. So to recap, I'd encourage you to consider three things. One, how does my marketing create true customer value and not simply push people to buy my product? Two, how does my product truly differ from competitors' product? If it doesn't, and be really honest with yourself, then how can I play a bigger role in figuring out how to better differentiate my product? I'm not talking about simply communicating differences. I'm talking about having a seat at the table of product development and innovation. I know this varies widely from organization to organization, but in some organizations, marketing is seen simply as they're the people who help us sell. They generate leads. They are there to communicate and promote. Marketing, by definition, is not simply that. Marketing is also about shaping the product, creating the product, and you owe it to yourself and your organization to play a bigger role in the shaping of that product. You know, for one thing, the benefit to you is as you move the product to a more highly differentiated, emotionally impactful product, it becomes a lot easier for you to sell it. It becomes a lot easier for you to find people who see your product as the true solution to a particular need or address a particular want. And then three, how do I bring to life the value of my product and the impact it has on people's lives through emotionally engaging storytelling? You know, for us, as I said before, we really focus on two things. One is, what am I doing to educate the market, to expand the number of people out there who see us as an option? And two, how am I engaging in emotional storytelling that really communicates a sense of what it is to be in a community, what the value is, you know, and presents us in a very authentic way. I'll leave you with one final thought, and then I'm hoping, you know, we can really get into some discussion here. And this comes from John Jantsch. John is the author of Duct Tape Marketing and some other very smart books on sales and marketing. And he says, you've got to answer the right question in consumers' minds. The question is, why buy anything? Not why buy from us. Before you can sell a community, you've got to sell the idea that this particular solution is the right solution for someone, or this particular product fills a desire, fills a need. And for so many people, senior community living, we haven't made the case why they should buy this. And before you can sell your community, you've got to educate people. You've got to communicate why they should buy this product, not just your product. You know, given the huge number of people who think they're perfectly fine and happy at home, that's the most important question for us to ask, and we often fail to ask or answer it. Before you sell your community, you got to sell the idea of community living. And if we don't, we can pretty much count on remaining a tiny, increasingly irrelevant niche in a rapidly growing market. And on that bright, happy note, I'm going to close, and hopefully we can get into some conversation.
Thank you, Dan. I apologize for the people who couldn't see the picture. It looks like from the comments that I got, about half of you could and half of you couldn't see the video. If I spent a lot of time watching the Olympics, so I saw that particular commercial about once a day for the last couple of weeks. But if you haven't seen it and the other P&G mom videos, they will have you tearing up. So make sure you get your Kleenex box and go to YouTube and watch some of their videos because they're really wonderful. I am going to start off the questions here. I I would encourage you to ask questions. Use the question box on the side of your screen. I've had a little more time than most of the people on this call to think about what Dan said, because I heard him give this presentation the first time he did at a senior living conference a couple months ago. And that picture of the car, and you know, if senior living marketers sold cars, it would be, it would have brakes and it would go forward. And you know, we talk about senior living a lot at Caring.com in our articles with our family advisors, and we fall into the, oh, it's just like home, you can eat anytime you want to. You know, if it were just like home, you wouldn't need to mention that, because of course, if you're at home, you can eat anytime you want to. So I guess, Dan, what I would say is, let's say that you are, you know, a single community, you've got a fairly limited marketing budget. What are some ideas for how you could really go about talking about your community in a different way?
I think first and foremost, the way to talk about your community is by telling the stories of the people you serve. You know, it's great to have collateral that, you know, explains features and amenities, benefits of community living, but really what people need to understand is, what would my life be like? You know, what is living in a community really about? Because for those of us who work in the industry, you know, we live this every day, and maybe we sometimes forget that for most people this is a foreign thing. Unless they have family or personal experience with a senior living community, they have no idea what's inside this black box. And so it does not a lot of money to spend time with your residents and your team members and really ferret out what the compelling stories are, the stories that exemplify why we do what we do. You know, we had a resident in one of our communities who, when he moved in, he had physical limitations. He was using a walker. The campus of the community is fairly spread out. I would have said that this is a person who maybe would be a little challenged by this community. But he loved to come to meetings and to presentations we would do to prospects, and he would go up on stage with his walker and start talking about his personal experience, and at the end he would throw the walker off the stage because he no longer needs it. I mean, the experience he's had in the community has enabled him to sort of turn back time a little on his physical limitations, and he is now healthier and more mobile. You know, it's dramatic stuff. You know, the person, we had another resident who, we did a dining documentary video, and it wasn't about, oh, the chefs here are so wonderful and the food is, I love the food and everything. It was more focused on the importance of the dining experience to building community. And there's a gentleman in one of our communities who talked about how for most of his life he'd been fairly reclusive, you know, very introverted, a bit of a loner, and he talked about how his involvement in the dining experience, both on campus and going off campus, how that really sort of brought him out of his shell. You know, those kinds of stories of transformation, those are your sales stories. You know, it's not about levels of care and we've got an Olympic-sized swimming pool and everything else. It's about how people use what you offer to transform their lives. And that's not budget restricted. You may not be able to shoot, you know, the really sophisticated high production value video, but you can certainly do simple case studies. You can do simple storytelling that shares with people, you know, those experiences, because people look at those experiences and they see themselves in those stories. I
love both of those examples, Dan. Here's another question. This is talking about the community with the retirement home for lakefront retirement living headline. You know, it's possible that that was done on purpose in order to rank high for SEO on the keyword retirement.
Absolutely.
So, you know, how do you think sometimes people go too far overboard with trying to cram in a bunch of keywords for SEO purposes? And, you know, sort of building on that, how do you go from, how do you tell the stories in a way that still means you rank high in the search engines?
So that's a great question. Because we focus on content marketing to drive our inbound program, you know, our goal on our site is obviously it's all about lead generation. And in order to generate leads, we've got to have not just volume, but the right people coming to our site. And we've developed a lot of rich content in a lot of different formats that is highly optimized to attract traffic to our site. So my suggestion would be, if you need to play those kinds of SEO games, then maybe it's because you're thin in terms of other meaningful, relevant content. Because if you build enough relevant content that is optimized for search, that will address your SEO needs. And you don't have to play games like, how many times can I repeat the word retirement on a page? And increasingly, you know, Google and the other search engines, you know, they are really sophisticated about this stuff, and they continue to get more sophisticated in being able to differentiate between someone who's trying to game search engine optimization and someone who is really trying to provide relevant content, content that is relevant to someone's search, because it makes their search engine more valuable when it becomes more accurate. So when you do things like that, it may give you some limited value, but in the long term, it doesn't pay off. Your better approach is to build rich content, make sure it's optimized, make sure that it aligns with the needs of the people and the interests of the people you're trying to attract. And that goes back to first building customer personas, really understanding who it is you're trying to communicate with, and then building content that is relevant to what their information needs are and you know, what will draw them to your site.
Awesome. Here is a really fun, perceptive comment. And again, to your point earlier, it's a little bit hard to do this in a webinar. We had a great conversation at the conference, but Rochelle Mitchell says, for those who can't really change the budget, during the tour is a really good way to storytell instead of sell. So when your story is solid and resonates with your lead, then you ask them to give a rating for good feedback on your sites. So I think that's a really good comment in the sense that instead of having the tour be, look at this beautiful chandelier, look at this beautiful common space, look at this beautiful dining room, look at this beautiful apartment, it's let me tell you about the man who was able to throw away his walker, or even better, if you can arrange it, let me introduce you to this particular resident who's here. You know, we did a webinar on giving tours, and one of the suggestions on that was engage your residents in a tour. Let them tell their story so that it's not about look at all these beautiful fixtures, but rather here's a great person. Let them share their experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And I, you know, we've developed content that we hope people will use to guide themselves in their tours. We developed a consumer guide that focuses on, you know, what are the questions you should ask on a tour? Because we want people to ask the right questions, not just the questions, you know, we're not feeding them questions that we have great answers to. We want them to ask the right questions to help determine whether this is the right product for them. You know, and that the comment about how to structure the tour, it makes me think about college admission tours. You know, I've got a daughter who's going to be going to college next year, and you know, one of the things so many colleges do is they have students lead those tours. And sure, they'll point out, you know, that building is, you know, there's the Chem building, and you know, there's the Alumni Center, et cetera. But they're in a position to share their personal experiences. You know, what their life is like. They can answer questions about, well, what's it like to live here? What's it like to go to school here? And so to that point, to be able to share those kinds of experiences as opposed to simply pointing out features and amenities, that's much more emotionally engaging. And to your point, it doesn't cost anything. It's all about just how you structure the tour or how you structure your program. It doesn't have to cost money.
Yeah, we have another question coming in, which is, are there some other examples of ways that senior living communities are using emotionally engaging stories in the right way in their marketing? And I have noticed at least one person who posted a video that her community had done around the Olympics and in this idea of sharing stories. So again, I apologize, it's hard to do this in a webinar, but what I would say is if there's anyone on the session who has something that their community has done that's really good, or that is something that they've seen that's really good, either post it in the question box or send me an email, katie@caring.com, after this webinar, and I'll put it in the follow-up email and send it out to everybody so you can watch the videos or have a look at the Facebook share or whatever it is. On that topic, Dan, here's a question about how is the B Group best utilizing social media? Where do you see the future of senior living as it relates to incorporating social media?
Again, a really great question to which I do not have a great answer. You know, I think we, like many, have really struggled with what the appropriate role of social media is. I think we all know that social media is, for what we do and who we're trying to reach, it's not a great lead gen tool. And so we think in terms of, well, how can we use it to build the brand? How do we use it from a customer service perspective? Optimally, as I look at platforms like Facebook, for example, you know, Facebook seems to be a good opportunity for sort of opening that window on what daily community living looks and feels like. But it's really difficult because it requires, you know, a pretty constant feed of quality content to support that. And quite frankly, I haven't seen anyone out there, and I would encourage anyone on the call, if you've seen someone out there who's doing a really outstanding job with social media, please share with the rest of us, because I think a lot of people are on social media just because, well, everybody's on social media. And we've gone through various iterations, you know, of how we use Facebook, how we use Twitter, how we use LinkedIn. Right now we're in a reevaluation process again. And a point I would make with people is today, your website, your social media strategies, all of your marketing initiatives, you've got to constantly be revisiting and rethinking and testing things because everything is constantly changing. You know, the days when you could just sort of put your website up there and it's fine for a few years, those days are gone. We're in the process right now of doing yet another overhaul of our website, because what we found was, although we've got all this really rich content on our site, people are missing a lot of it because they're going directly to a community page, and that content becomes a little invisible. Well, it may be great content and really helpful, but if people never see it, it's not particularly useful. So we're working on an overhaul, a reorganization. But coming back to social media, you know, you got to remember that different social media channels are good for different things. I think, you know, Twitter is potentially a good channel for building your referral network, you know, reaching out, connecting, communicating to other senior serving organizations and people. Facebook, in theory, should be a good place for, you know, opening that window on what community living looks like, but there's a real challenge in feeding that channel. LinkedIn obviously has tremendous recruitment opportunities, and again, to link with other senior serving professionals. But my one comment would be, as you look at different channels, there are a lot of channels that you think, boy, I really want to be on Pinterest. I want to be on Instagram. You know, I want to be on Snapchat. You've got to really look at who the audience is on that channel and make sure that, although it feels like it'd be really great, you know, and you could do some really fun and interesting things here, if it doesn't align with your business objectives, then you're probably wasting your time. There are channels out there that I absolutely love, that I use personally, that I know are not appropriate for what I'm trying to accomplish. So I think that there are kind of two levels that we're looking at in terms of social media. One is, how should we be using social media to build the brand? Because I believe that increasingly it's a local sell. People are looking at a community and they're buying a community, but increasingly they are also asking questions about the organization behind the community. They want to know who stands behind this community and what do they represent, what do they stand for. That's profit and nonprofit. I mean, brand is going to be increasingly important, and we're going to need to do more brand-oriented marketing, and social is a good place for that. And then there's the community-level marketing, which is more geared toward lead generation. And for social, I wish I had an answer. That was a really long-winded way of saying I do not have an answer. We are all experimenting, and if anyone really cracks the code on this, they should share it with others.
So we actually have some really good ideas coming in. There are several people who post either pictures or little videos of the activities that are going on in the community. One person actually posts every day the activities, and that not only is a great way to communicate to prospects some of the stories of life in the community, but it's also a great way to engage with family members of residents so they can see what's happening. And I think that's a great idea. That sounds terrific. And in fact, I would encourage you to think of Facebook as a way to communicate, you know, as Dan said, not so much about lead generation, but rather about community building with the people who already have a loved one in your community, so that they can share it with their friends who are thinking about it.
Yeah, and Katie, I've given some thought to, if you can identify both among your residents and your family members and other interested parties, if you can identify those people who are on Facebook, you know, Facebook is potentially a way to do that combination of experiencing the community from afar and some level of customer service. You know, to be able to answer family questions. Obviously, there are questions that are good public questions, and then there are questions that, for reasons of HIPAA and other confidentiality concerns, you don't really want to get into on Facebook. But I guess my one, beyond storytelling that focuses on activities, I would encourage you to also do those sort of quieter, more reflective stories with residents where residents just sort of share what's going on in their lives. You know, we don't want to be too focused on, look at all these activities that we're doing, because that can also turn some people off, that they feel like if I join this community, I've got to constantly be going, you know, they're organizing my life for me. You know, interspersing with that, you know, the stories of people who are just truly living their lives the way that they lived their lives before, but it's just in a different setting, and connecting that to how they're able to live that life in a way that was increasingly at home more of a challenge. But now that I'm in a community that has all this support, it really enables me to continue to do the things and experience the things that I want to experience. I want to make sure that, you know, you include that, because you are reaching out to people who both want to actively participate in your activities and others who, frankly, they don't. I mean, that's not their thing.
The introverts versus the extroverts.
Yep.
So we're almost out of time, but there's another question that's come up that I think is really interesting, so I'm hoping you can answer it in about 2 minutes. Do you have any tips on how to find salespeople who can use this story-based selling approach, or you know, train people to use this story-based selling approach? And
that is, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, one thing I would think in answer to that is this is sort of the age-old question about sales versus marketing, and it could be that this is a great way for marketing to pitch in, so the salespeople don't have to be the great storytellers. Marketing can help them out with that.
Yes, to some extent, but I would say increasingly, you know, as marketing shifts to more inbound and digital based, and I think if you look at your metrics, you know, you've watched the increase of leads coming in through digital channels, whether it's through an online directory like Caring.com, whether it's through your own website. You know, the consumer is doing most of their research before they even become visible to you. You know, in business to business, we don't have those stats for our industry, but for B2B, which I think is a very similar sell to what we're doing, they found that up to 68% of the buyer's journey has been completed by that prospect before they become visible to you. And I think that's true for us. A lot of families, a lot of older adults, they're doing so much research before they ever become visible to us. And so they come to us in a very different place than the person who walked in sort of new to the conversation about senior community living, and we were the font of all knowledge. So increasingly, you know, we're moving to this inbound marketing approach, and we've got to move to more of an inbound sales approach that aligns. What I would encourage you to do is look at the concepts behind inbound sales and how it aligns with inbound marketing. And yes, marketing provides tools to support that storytelling, but to the comment earlier when we were talking about tours, you've got to have salespeople who are able to storytell, personalize, you know, bring to life those experiences. When they do that deep discovery and really understand what's motivating someone or motivating their family, you've got to be able to tell stories that sort of illustrate why your product is the solution, meets the need that they are pointing to. You got to understand the customer's pain points to be able to then storytell in a way that aligns with those pain points, and they say, oh wow, that's a great solution to my problem. You know, and I think a lot of it has to do with training and making sure that sales and marketing are really close aligned, in their approach and in their training, and that marketing is playing an active role in sales training, not just providing tools, but also helping them understand, you know, how to tell the story so that people are not experiencing a disconnect where marketing is telling one story and then they come in and they have an entirely different experience with the salesperson.
Thank you so much, Dan. We've gotten a bunch of great suggestions in the questions, so I will put those together in the email that we send out post-webinar, so watch your email. I want to quickly put in a plug for our next webcast. We're going to be going through the results of Caring's Caregiver Journey Survey. We do this every year to get insights into how people navigate the process of finding senior care information and choosing a community. So join us for that. And as always, feel free to reach out with any questions, suggestions, feedback. Give us feedback in the little survey when you exit the webinar. And again, thank you everybody for your time, and thank you, Dan, for such a great thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye-bye.